Today's topic of discussion is the West Bengal Shops and Establishments Act 1963 and Rules 1964. The West Bengal Shops and Establishments Act 1963 has been enacted on 2nd April 1963 and it became effective from 15th August 1964 along with the rules made under this act. This act extends to the whole of West Bengal and it is enacted as a social welfare legislation aims to regulate certain conditions of service of the employees. Obviously, employees of different shops and establishments. It is an act to consolidate and amend the law relating to the regulations of conditions of work and employment in shops, commercial and other establishments. Now, what is the object of this act? Object of this act is to regulate holidays, hours of work, payment of wages and leave of persons employed in shops and establishments in West Bengal. So it is clear to you that this is not a pharmaceutical legislation, but it is included in your syllabus because it is one of the important social legislation, and this regulation of shops and establishments, it is actually for the persons employed in different shops and establishments, maybe commercial establishment or other kinds of establishments. Their rights and the obligations of the employers are being guaranteed by this law. So this social legislation is very important, especially for the workers of the unorganized sectors like shops and establishments, small establishments. Each and every state is empowered to enact this type of law, that is for regulation of shops and establishments. Accordingly, our state, the West Bengal, has also enacted this West Bengal Shops and Establishment Act 1963. Now, what are the salient features and also the important definitions which are being included in this act that we will discuss now? Salient features of West Bengal Shops and Establishments Act 1963 and the West Bengal Shops and Establishments Rules 1964. Now first we will discuss some definitions of some important terminologies. Now what does the shops means here? Shops means any premises for the wholesale and retail sale of commodities as well as services. So commodities and services, both kind of dealings in both way, wholesale dealing and retail sale dealing, are being done from the premises, that premises are called shops here. Then what are establishments? Establishment are of two types, commercial establishments and also the establishment for public entertainment or amusement. Employer means a person owning or having charge of an establishment and includes an agent or a manager. Shopkeeper means a person owning a shop or having charge of a shop and also includes an agent or a manager of the shop. Another important terminology which has been used here, that is the young person. Young person means a person who has completed his 14th year but not completed 18th year. Previously, when the Act 1963 was being made, it was given that young person means who has completed his 12th year. But the Act, when amended in 2015, it has been amended in this way that young person now Under the Act, a young person means a person who has completed his 14th year of age but not completed 18th year. He is not adult, but young person is allowed to work in shop and establishment with certain limitations, certain extra rights have been provided to them. But any person who has not attained the age of 14th year, that means who has not become a young person under this act, he is not eligible to work in any shop and establishment, or in other way, the owner of a shop or an establishment is not, you cannot employ any person who has not attained the age of 14th year. Definitions, some more definitions. Person employed, what does it mean? Means a person employed but does not include owner or relatives of owners. So in a shop, if the owner is also there, but that owner will not be considered as a person employed, and at the same time, if any of his relatives also working in that shop or in that establishment, he or she will also not be considered as a person employed. Wages means the same meaning wages as defined in the Payment of Wages Act 1936. Now these are few of the definitions which are being used, the terminologies which are being used in this act. Now where or the circumstances in which this act is not applicable? Number one, offices of central or state government. There this act is not applicable, obviously. Any railway service, airways service, water transport service, tramways or motor service, postal services, telegraph or telephone services, any system of public conservancy or sanitation, or any industry, business or undertaking which supplies power, light or water to the public, and those are run by or under the authority of central or any state government or any public sector undertakings. These organizations are not coming under the purview of this act as an establishment. Moreover, any institution for the purpose of treatment of sick, infirm, destitute or mentally unfit persons, that institutions will also not be coming under the purview of this act, or in other words, this act is not applicable on those institutions. Shops or stalls at public fair. If in any public fair there are some stalls or shops are there, this act is not applicable on that stalls or on that shops. Or in any bazaar held by any charitable purpose, then also the bazaar which is held for any charitable purpose, if any shops or stalls there in that bazaar, this act is not applicable on that shops. Stalls or refreshment rooms at railway stations or docks or airports are also not coming under the purview of this act. So these are the areas where the West Bengal Shops and Establishments Act 1973 is not applicable. Some more exemptions are also provided by the West Bengal government for application of this act. What are those exemptions? State government may exempt shops or establishments generally or on such occasions in such areas for such period as may be specified in the notification. So by publishing notice, gazette notification, government may exempt some shops or establishments from the application of this act. Moreover, any class or classes of persons employed in shops or establishments in a managerial capacity, or any traveler or canvasser, messenger, watchman or caretaker, or exclusively in connection with customs examinations, on them this act or provisions of this act is not applicable. Next, holidays. Every shop or every commercial establishment shall remain closed on, and every person employed shall be allowed holiday at least one day and a half day next preceding or following such day. This is very important provision of this act, that each shop and each commercial and other establishment shall have to allow one day and half day in each week holiday as a holiday to every person employed in that this shop or establishment. So one full day and one half day either next preceding day of the holiday or the before that holiday has to be provided to the employed persons as holiday, and no deduction from wages on account of holiday is allowed. Now the hours of work in the shop. The hours of working is differently classified in case of shops and establishments. In case of shops, opening of the shops not earlier than 8 a.m. as per this act, and closing not later than 10 p.m. Previously it was 8 p.m. but wide amendment of 2015 it has been increased up to 10 p.m. So 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. it is the opening hours of a shop. And no person employed shall work more than 8 hours, 8.5 hours in a day. So the persons employed in a shop, his total duty hours in a day will be 8.5 hours. And in a week, it will be not more than 48 hours. No person is allowed to work more than 5.5 hours at a stretch. So every employee will not work more than 5.5 hours at a stretch unless a period of rest of at least 1 hour has been allowed to him. So after taking the rest of 1 hour, again he may work, and his total working hour will be 8.5 hours in a day. Hours of work in establishments now. Or moreover, one thing, that working hours and period of rest together should not spread over 10.5 hours in a day in a shop. Now, establishment. In case of establishment, no hotel or restaurant, the hours of closing be later than 11 p.m. No person employed shall work more than 8.5 hours in a day and 48 hours in a week, same like shops. No person is allowed to work more than 5.5 hours at a stretch unless a period of rest of at least 1 hour has been allowed, and working hours and period of rest together should not spread over 10.5 hours in a day. Now, special provisions for the young persons. They will be treated separately, as I have told you earlier. The young persons, that means the persons whose age is from 14 to 18, not more than 18. As per this act, any establishment or shop can employ a young person, but his duty hours will be different from the adult persons. No young person shall work more than 7 hours in a day. While it is 8.5 hours in case of adult, it will not be more than 7 hours for young person, as well as it will not be more than 40 hours in a week. The young person shall not work more than 4 hours in a day at a stretch without a rest of at least 1 hour. And benefits available in other acts shall also be enjoyed by the young persons. So other benefits as enjoyed by the adult workers, it is also available to the young persons. And one most important provision, that no child below the 14 years of age is allowed to work in any shop or establishment. Next is women workers. Women workers shall work, they shall not work beyond 6 p.m. in any establishment for public entertainment or amusement other than a cinema or a theatre. But in case of other types of establishments, that is commercial establishments, or in case of any shop, the women workers shall not work beyond 8 p.m. So this is about the working hours of the employees in shops and establishments. Now leaves. What are different kinds of leaves are allowed to the workers in shops and establishments? There are four kinds of leaves: privilege leave, sick leave, casual leave, and maternity leave. Privilege leave, it is allowable to every worker of both the sex, and privilege is of full pay for 14 days for every completed year of continuous service. So after completion of 1 year continuous service, each employee is will get 14 days full pay privilege leave. And if he doesn't want to enjoy that leave, it will be accumulated, provided maximum accumulation of 28 days of privilege leave is there. Now the sick leave on half pay for 14 days on medical certificate in a year, and it is also in the same way accumulated, and maximum accumulation is 56 days of half pay sick leave. Casual leave on full pay for 10 days, but here accumulation is not allowed. Women workers are entitled to get one more kind of leave, and that is the maternity leave, and the number of days of maternity leave is as prescribed in the state that is also entitled of the female workers of any shops and establishments. Now wages. Wages for overtime shall be calculated at twice the ordinary rate of wages. Overtime shall include any work done on a day declared as a national holiday by notification. So whenever there is national holiday declared by the government, on that day overtime is allowed. Overtime is also allowed in any ordinary day also, but the rate of overtime is twice the ordinary rate of wages. Payment and recovery of wages shall be, what is the payment and recovery of wages? It shall be paid not later than 10th day of the month immediately succeeding. So the salary of the previous month must have to pay by the 10th of the next month to each workers of the shops or establishments. In case of non-payment within that stipulated time, an unauthorized deduction of such a person can make an application to the appropriate authority within 6 months, and then appropriate authority, who will be called as a referee, after hearing both the parties, will make order accordingly. If the aggrieved party has the right to make appeal before the appellate authority within 30 days of such order. And in case of non-compliance of direction, the relevant amount may be recovered by a magistrate so designated. Now, registration of shops and establishments. This is one important provision of this act, that each and every shops and establishment has to be registered compulsorily under this act. So registration is compulsory here. Every shopkeeper and employer shall apply within 6 months of the commencement of this act for registration of their unit before the registering authority in the prescribed form, and shall pay the prescribed fee as given under this act and rules made thereunder. Every shopkeeper and employer shall display that certificate of registration in the premises. And in case of winding up of that shop or establishment, shopkeeper and employer shall within 15 days inform the registering authority in prescribed form that they have closed their business. So after closure also they have the right, they have some obligations, they have to apply in the prescribed statutory form to the registering authority that they have closed their or winding up their business. And that has to be done within 15 days of such closure. A shopkeeper or employer shall apply to the registering authority in prescribed form and pay the prescribed fee for renewal of the certificate of registration, and that has been done after each 3 years, expiry of 3 years from the date of issue of registration. They have to renew their certificate of registration. Now this is all about the registration. They have to compulsorily register their institute, their firm, their shops or establishment, and they have to display the certificate of registration, and that is also mandatory as per the provision of this act. In case of closure of that business, they have to intimate within 15 days of such closure, and they have to renew their certificate of registration after each expiry of 3 years, and within 30 days of that expiry they have to renew their registration certificate. Now records. What are the records they have to keep? Every shopkeeper and employer maintain and keep registers of employees in prescribed manner. So all employees, they have to enter their name in a particular register. Format is also given as prescribed under the rule, and that register of employees have to be maintained. Every shopkeeper and employer shall furnish every person employed with a letter of appointment. So appointment letter issuance is mandatory here, and the form of the appointment letter is also prescribed under the rule. Inspectors. The state government may appoint inspectors for the purpose of this act, and all inspectors shall be deemed to be a public servant. Actually, inspectors are appointed under section 19 of this act, and inspectors are deemed to be public servant under the meaning of section 21 of the Indian Penal Code. Inspectors may enter and inspect any premises or place to inquire about the provisions of this act and about the compliance of the provisions of this act, examine any person who is employed in the shop or establishment, and if required, seize or take copies of registers, records and documents or notices from that shop or establishments. Now what are the penalties? Penalty: a fine up to 2,000 rupees for the first offence for any violation of any of the provision of the act or the rules is there, but shall not be less than rupees 150 for the first offence. In case of repeat of offence within 2 years of the first offence, imprisonment up to 6 months or fine up to 5,000 rupees, or both, is the penalty of the offenders. So in case of first offence, it is rupees 2,000 fine, but magistrate may impose lesser amount, but that shall not be less than rupees 150. In case of subsequent offence, if it has happened within 2 years of the first offence, then imprisonment up to 6 months may be passed, may be ordered, or fine up to rupees 5,000, or with both. For non-maintenance of records and registers, or for non-displaying of the notice, imprisonment up to 6 months or fine up to rupees 5,000, or with both. That is the penal provision. Now the appointment of inspectors, which I have already told you that section 19 gives the provision for appointment of inspectors, and state government is empowered to appoint inspectors by publication in the Gazette notification for the purposes of this act. And all inspectors appointed shall be deemed to be a public servant within the meaning of section 21 of the Indian Penal Code. And cooperation with the inspectors is a important duty of the shop owners or the establishment owners or managers or other employers. All orders, letters, reports and other documents issued by an inspector shall be properly preserved by the shopkeeper or the employer for a period of 12 months and shall be made available for examination by the inspector. Now, in this act, some statutory forms are being provided which are to be used for different purposes, like Form A is provided for a register of shops and establishments. It is maintained by the inspectors or the government. All the shops and establishment in a district is maintained in a form, that is Form A. Form B is provided for making application for registration by the shops and establishments. Form C is used for making any change. It is a notice of change. If anything happened, any change happened after getting the registration certificate, within 7 days after such change, the owner of the shops or the establishment has to apply before the registering authority in Form C. Form D is the application form for renewal of registration, that is after 3 years. Form E is a notice of winding up of the business, that is the closure of the business. So Form E is used for intimating the registering authority about the closure. Form F is the notice of loss of the registration certificate. On loss, for getting duplicate copy, they will apply in Form F. Form G is notice of weekly closure. It is a very important provision under this act, the weekly closure, the duty hours, and that has to be notified. So weekly closure has to be previously noted down to the authority, that is the registering authority, and Form G is the statutory form here for using it, and only it can be changed once in a year. Form H, it is notice of weekly holidays, and Form I, it is the register of daily hours of work and rest intervals of persons employed. So very important document which is kept in the premises for inspection. It is the register in Form I for daily hours of work and rest. Form J, it is the register of leave. So leave register is important document again. Form K is notice of claim for maternity benefit. Form L, delivery certificate. Form M is the pay register. Whenever payment is been provided to the staffs, it is mentioned in a register, it is recorded in a register, that is in Form M. And Form T is the notice of overtime. Form U is the register of overtime work. So notice will be given in Form T, and the entire overtime works of all the staffs is mentioned in a register, that is provided in Form U. Form V is the diary of the inspector for the months. Inspectors do their inspections and other functions, and they maintain a diary, monthly diary, and that diary is provided in Form V. And Form W is the register of employees. Form W is the register of employees. Each shop and establishment has to maintain a register of employees of all its employees. That is in Form W. Form X is the letter of appointment and the format, how the letter of appointment will be generated and what will be there, that has been mentioned in Form X. Each and every staff must get letter of appointment from the owner or the shopkeeper. Now I'll discuss some frequently asked questions which will help you to answer easily, better than detailed reading of this act and rules. So now we'll discuss some question answer which are frequently asked. Number 1, the West Bengal Shops and Establishment registration process in the nutshell under the West Bengal Shops and Establishment Act. Registration of any newly opened shop and establishments had to be done within 30 days of its commencement. So after commencement of this act, after implementation of this act, if any new shop or establishment comes, it has compulsory to register before the registering authority under this act within 30 days of its commencement. Now for registration, what documents are needed? Form B in triplicate, which I have told you, form is the application form for registration. Form G in duplicate, Form H in duplicate, Form X, that is the appointment letters to the staffs, in triplicate. Tier 7, that is the challan copy for fees details, Details fees is also mentioned here, and this details is not required for you, but then also I am just discussing that for any new shop and whose employee number is only nil, no employees there, rupees 25 is only required as registration fee, and for any change there is rupees 10 is required. And if there is employee 1 to 5, up to 5 employees, 30 rupees, for change 20 rupees, 6 to 20 employees, 40 rupees, more than 20 employees, then 100 rupees is the registration fees. So fees is not very high. And for establishment there is separate rate. Here also if an establishment has no employee, 25, 1 to 5 employee, 30, 6 to 20, 50 rupees, and more than 20 employees an establishment has, for registration it has to pay rupees 250. So with the fees they will submit the fees document, and then they have to provide the trade license for registration. They have to provide, if it is a limited company, a copy of the memorandum of articles and memorandum of association, list of directors along with form 32, and if the constitution is partnership, then partnership, in case of partnership form, a copy of the partnership deed to be provided. If it is a non-banking financial company, a certificate from Reserve Bank of India is to be submitted before the registering authority for registration. If an insurance based company, then a certificate from IRDA has to be submitted. The IRDA means Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority. They are giving certificate who are the establishments of insurance. The registration certificate has to be renewed after every 3 years, and if any changes in the said certificate is required to be done, then that has to be amended within 7 days of such change, which I have already told you. In the office and factory, what documents are to be displayed? Number 1, the registration certificate has to be displayed. Number 2, notice of weekly closure. Number 3, notice of weekly holidays. These documents are to be displayed in the premises of the shop or establishment. And the following records are to be maintained by them in their office: appointment letter, attendance register, pay register, register of employees, overtime register, visit book is another thing for visit of inspectors. Visit book has to be maintained in the premises. Moreover, self-certification, it is also allowed under this act. Self-certification by the owner or the shopkeeper or the manager of the establishment. Self-certification by the owner shall be accepted under the Shops and Establishment Act 1963 as per the matter contained in Schedule I, and such self-certification shall be deemed as sufficient compliance and shall dispense with the necessity of inquiry and verification. Some more questions to clear you about the provisions of this act. Whether Provident Fund Act 1952 is applicable to shops and establishments? The answer is yes, provided the number of employee is 20 or more. So if any shop or establishment has 20 or more employees, then Provident Fund Act 52 is also applicable for that establishment or shop. Whether West Bengal Gratuity Act 1972 is applicable, here also it is surely applicable, provided the shop or the establishment employing 10 or more employees. If it is 10 or more, then Gratuity Act is also applicable. Whether the Payment of Bonus Act 1965 is applicable to the shops and establishments, this act is applicable provided the number of employed persons is 20 or more. Next, whether solicitor firms are covered under this Shops and Establishments Act? No, solicitor firms are not covered under this act. Whether chartered accountant firms are covered? No, chartered accountant firms are not covered. Whether the establishment of medical practitioners or any institution registered under Clinical Establishment Act of the state, are they coming under the purview of this West Bengal Shops and Establishment Act? Yes, the establishment of medical practitioners or any other kind of institutions which are registered under the Clinical Establishment Act is also coming under the purview of Shops and Establishment Act. Next, whether the State Bank of India or other nationalized banks are covered under this act? No. Obviously, no, they are not covered. But if any financial institutions, any private institutions, they are coming under the purview of this act. The excise shops, they are also coming under the purview of this act, surely. Whether there is any provision of layoff compensation? No, layoff compensation is for the factory, so it is not applicable to the shops and establishments. Whether West Bengal Shops and Establishment Act 1963 is applicable to educational institutions? Generally no, because as a profession it is not coming, but whenever they are running as a commercial institution, there this act is also applicable. Whether Workmen's Compensation Act is applicable? No, it is for the factory. How many hours an employee can work in a shop or an establishment? I have told you, not more than 8.5 hours in a day and not more than 48 hours in a week. How many hours overtime is permissible? 10 hours in a day and 120 hours total overtime can be done in a year. That is the limitation for overtime. How many hours an employee can be subjected to do work continuously at a stretch? It is 5.5 hours. What is the closing hour of hotel restaurant? That is 11 p.m. What is the closing hour of a shop or other kinds of establishment? That is 10 p.m. How many days privilege leave is allowed? 14 days full pay privilege leave, 14 days half pay sick leave, and 10 days full pay casual leave, and maternity leave as per the rules of the state is allowed to the employees. How many sick leave I have already told you, casual leave I have told you. Twice the ordinary rate of wages is given for the overtime. Within how many days any shop or establishment after its opening has to be registered? 30 days. So in 30 days of commencement of the business, any shop or establishment has to be compulsorily registered under this act. Within how many days changes, if any, happens after getting the registration certificate, if there are any changes, within how many days that changes has to be notified before the registering authority? Within 7 days. How many times the weekly closing days of any shop or establishment can be changed? Not more than once in a year. Weekly closing days of any shop or establishment can only be changed once in a year, and that is also by giving statutory form to the registering authority. Within how many days the winding up of a business is to be notified? 15 days. When registration certificate is to be renewed? Once every 3 years. What are the registers which are to be maintained? I have told you already. Register of hours of work and rest, register of leave in Form J, register of pay in Form M, register of overtime in Form U, register of employees in Form W. Now, whether a registration certificate can be transferred in the name of another person if there is change in the proprietorship or ownership? No, it cannot be done. It is not transferable. So in such cases, the existing owner has to surrender its registration certificate and the new person or new owner has to apply for a fresh registration certificate. So now the conclusion. This is all about this act and the rules. We are now coming to the conclusion. Shops and Establishments Acts have been enacted by the states to regulate conditions of work and to provide for statutory obligations of the employers and also the rights of the employees in unorganized sector of employment such as shops, commercial establishments, residential hotels, restaurants, eating houses, theaters and other establishments in their jurisdiction, means in the jurisdiction of the state. So it is a very, very important piece of legislation because it provides the rights of the employees of the unorganized sector. Now its applicability. It is applicable to all persons employed in an establishment or in a shop with or without wages. He may be employed without wages, but then also these provisions of this act is applicable on him. He will also has that right. But this act is not applicable to the members of the employer's family. Other features. Number one, it provides for compulsory registration as well as closure of shops and establishments. So it is very important provision that compulsory registration as well as closure. If you close the business of any shop or establishment, then also compulsorily you have to give the notice to the registering authority. And other area, that is when you are commencing your business, your registration is compulsory. Number two, it lays down the hours of work per day and per week. It also provides guidelines for rest interval. What is the duration of rest must be allowed to each staff. This act provides specifically, clearly, the opening and closing hours of a shop or establishment. It provides the closed days. It has to be previously declared by notice that what are the closing days. It also has to disclose the national and religious holidays, and also if there is any overtime work, that record has to be maintained. So it is very precise. Precisely, this act provides the obligation and rights of the employer and employees. It also lays down rules for the employment of children, young person, women. For example, children below 14 years of age is not employable, but young persons who are between this 14 and 18 years of age, they may be employed with certain facilities, and women's also certain facilities separately than other adult workers. Similarly, this act also provides the annual privilege leave, annual sick leave, annual casual leave, maternity leave. What is the duration of leaves they are entitled to get. It also provides that employer has to give the appointment and termination of service, etc. You cannot terminate any staff as and when you think so. If your staff is employed in an institution for more than 1 year, you have to give at least 1 month's notice for termination with citing the appropriate reasons. And the employee has also some right to go before the authority in the labor department for his points. This act also provides for maintenance of statutory registers. This act provides for maintenance of statutory registers and records and displays of notices. Moreover, obligation of employers as well as employees. Thank you. This is all about this act.